And, there are sparks of ideas. And I think as leaders, and I would say this to those coming up through the ranks, when you see that spark, have the courage to ignite it. Don't, sometimes you have to take that jump because everything says to you, this is where we should go. And I think that creative moment is so important to the future of higher education and to the future of our country. And I would advise people, don't forget your creativity, that creative genius that I think each of us has. If we unleash it, is probably as important or more important than all the data. So trust that. Trust that.
Welcome to IngenioUs, where we explore what it means to lead with authenticity, courage, and creativity in higher education. I'm your host, Melissa Morriss-Olson. There's a moment in leadership when you see something, a spark of an idea, an intuition that says, this is the right direction, or this is the right thing to do. And you have to decide, do I wait for more proof, more validation or evidence, more certainty? Or do I trust what I'm seeing and have the courage to act? Today's guest has built a 15-year presidency on the courage to kindle those sparks. Dr. Ann McElaney-Johnson is the president of Mount St. Mary's University in Los Angeles, and she never planned to be a university president. As an 18th century French literature professor, she couldn't have imagined this path. But what she did do, time and again, was say yes to opportunities that made her uncomfortable, that stretched her in unexpected ways. Now she's one of the most thoughtful voices that I have heard on what it really takes to lead in this moment of profound change in higher education. She talks openly about learning to relax into leadership, about the power of authenticity over performance, and about why our creative genius might matter more than we think in an age that prizes analysis above all else. This conversation is for anyone who's ever wondered if they should trust that spark they're seeing, whether you're early in your leadership journey or deep into it. Because Ann's message is clear. Don't lose your creative genius. Have the courage to kindle the spark. Let's listen to what that sounds like. President McElaney-Johnson, I am so pleased to welcome you today to the IngenioUs community.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks so much.
So I want to start by asking about your leadership journey. And you started as a French literature professor. Is that right?
I did, yes.
I love that. And now you're in your second decade as a university president. So tell us something about the journey. What shaped your move from the faculty to your leadership as a president? And are there any significant factors or influences that shaped your journey along the way?
Yeah, I think, my journey is probably not unusual because many of us have had similar things, but I was a full-time faculty member. 18th century French literature was my specialty, revolutionary literature. And so there's not an immediate bridge to what I do now. But as a faculty member, I had some great opportunities, and it was usually someone would tap me to do something I wouldn't have thought of. So I can remember when a senior faculty member asked me if I would be the faculty development coordinator soon after I'd been tenured as a faculty member. And I was honored to think, wow, someone even looked at me that I would have this leadership position. So I tried it. And what I learned in that was, which has been very important to my whole trajectory, I enjoyed the idea of helping people, connecting people to the resources they needed to do their jobs better. So I was working with faculty in terms of their own development. And I really enjoyed this sort of at this different level, this macro level, helping people and facilitating people's own professional development. And so, I found I had several opportunities like that. And it got me more and more interested in moving into a different kind of position, and eventually did move into an assistant dean of the associate dean of the college at a small women's college in North Carolina, and left the faculty position and have never looked back. What I also find that's been great in any administrative role is I can teach also. So I still get to connect in the classroom with students, which is really important to me. But again, across my trajectory, I would say, someone would say, have you thought of this? I'm a big believer in saying yes to opportunities. I like to try new things. And so I find that, exciting and always interesting. And so, bit by bit, with incredible mentors or people just helping me think about my own potential in new ways, I moved into this position 15 years ago.
If I were to follow you around your campus on a day, what would I see? So, for example, if I were in the corner, just seeing you move around, how do you show up as a leader? And do you have a superpower?
Uh,
One of those traits or attributes
yeah.
that kind of is carried through
Mhm.
in how you lead.
Um, so I think people would probably describe me as very energetic and a lot of passion for what I do. And so if you saw me around campus, I love to talk to people. I think that's part of the job, actually. What looks very informal to me is actually one of the most important parts of the position, which is to talk to people, see how they're doing, listen to what they're saying, gauge, where we are, how people are feeling, and what people need. So I enjoy having time around campus to engage faculty, staff, students, across the spectrum. I think that a superpower. I think some people would say I do have an enormous amount of energy. I actually think my superpower is really that I love what I do.
Uh,
And I think that, I find real joy in this work, even when it's difficult and stressful, which it can be. But there's great joy in being part of this journey of students. It's such a privilege. So I think that that's actually what fuels me. I just love what I do, and I love being part of an educational institution where faculty and staff are working with students and changing their lives.
Yeah, boy, I can see where that is important today more than ever, right?
Yeah.
As the
Yeah.
environment has gotten so much more challenging.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, over your time as president and your time in leadership roles, has your leadership style changed in any
Mhm.
way? So, if
Yeah.
you think about how you lead today compared to
Mhm.
when you started your presidency, how is it different?
Yeah. I had an interesting conversation a couple of years ago, about a year ago, with a faculty member who told me that she said, you've changed since you came. And I said, really? Like how? And she said, you're more relaxed. And I would say I've become more confident. You do this for a while and you realize you don't have to know it all. I think when I first started, I was a newbie president, and there's a sense of responsibility and gravity that you want to show up knowing what you're doing and having the answers that people are seeking. And over time, I've learned that that's actually not realistic. None of us has all the answers. Things keep changing. The questions keep changing. And so I think now I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with the fact that I work with great people. I need to depend on them. They can depend on me as well. So I'm more relaxed. And actually, that makes it much more enjoyable, because you're yourself, but you're not having to be on in the same way that can be more stressful. I think another thing I would say that's critically important, and I remember when I was interviewing for the position, my husband said to me, "You have to be yourself." Like in this interview, because he came along and had to watch me in session after session after session. And he said, just be who you are. You can't fake your way into this job to get the job. And at the time I thought, well, that's really good advice. And it actually is the most important advice. Like you just have to be yourself. And I think I've become more and more comfortable with that over the years.
Yeah, boy, that speaks for the longevity factor as
Yeah.
well. You think about, you've had the benefit, and your institution has been blessed by your longevity in the role. But you think about all the moving around that is
Yeah.
happening now, and then the impact, right, on the institution
Yeah.
with new presidents coming in and out, and yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely.
So you're also touching on, I think, the importance of fit between
Hmm.
who a leader is and the institution that they're leading. And Mount St. Mary's,
Hmm.
uh, for our listeners who may not know, was founded by the Sisters of St. Joseph with a mission to respond to the needs of the time. So,
Hmm.
can you tell us a little bit about the fit between who you are and the mission and what that mission means to you?
Yeah. Yes, and because it means everything. And I don't think you can be successful in a leadership role if there isn't a fit. It's just too important. It has to be resonant, consonant with who you are. So at Mount St. Mary's, we were founded by the Sisters of St. Joseph, and since their founding, which is 375 years ago, they have always been about responding to the needs of the community and finding out what are the needs and then building the structures and the ministries to respond to that. And they've done that over their history of over 300 years. And so that's part of the DNA of this institution. And it's a perfect thing for universities, particularly in the 21st century, because if there's one thing we know, we have to, in higher ed, be flexible and respond to the evolving needs and the evolving workplace and the evolving demands that will be on our students and the challenges our students are going to meet. They're not the same as they were a decade ago, and they're certainly not the same as they were 50 years ago or 100 years ago when we were founded. And so that has been the call since I've been at the Mount is, how do we, at our core, be innovative in a way that we're always thinking about what are the needs of our students in the classrooms today, but how are we preparing for the students who will follow? And so we can't do things the way we did. We can't do things like we did 2 years ago. And so that's a constant requirement for flexibility, nimble thinking, creative thinking, and that really is something that means a lot to me. That excites me. Some people find that a little scary. I actually find that really exhilarating.
Yeah. Well, that's a great example of how the mission comes into play as well
Yes,
and informs the things you're thinking about on a regular basis. So
exactly. Mhm.
now you've talked about leading through crisis.
Mhm.
You had the fire, the Getty
Yeah,
fire evacuation, and then, of course, COVID-19. In
mhm.
your case, I believe those things happened within months of each other. Is
Yeah.
that close
Mhm.
proximity? So, can you take us inside one of those experiences and tell us about what it was like to make decisions in real time?
Yeah. Um, yeah, there have been a lot of challenges, and so I'm thinking which is a better example. Let me take us to COVID, which every university went through, and so I think that other leaders can really connect to that because we all had to figure out overnight. Because none of us understood the severity of what we were facing. None of us understood when we all shut down in March of 2020 what that
Mm.
actually meant. I mean, we thought it might be a few weeks. And then we thought when it got hot in the summer, we'd kill these germs or this virus and we'd all be back. So, like every university, we had to overnight think, what does the model look like? And we had just come out of coming back from a fire where we'd been evacuated for months from one of our campuses and had to have been, we were very creative in our response. So we really built on that sense of how do you respond to this situation? And so we actually focused on that, responding to the needs of the time. How do you respond to this moment? Because this is not like any other moment. And so we, like everybody else, went online and got our faculty in. We were on spring break. By the time we got back, everybody was ready to go. Which was a phenomenal thing in higher ed. Everyone thinks of higher ed as like a slow turning boat, that just can't pivot. And we all did. And I think we all learned something about ourselves and our institutions under pressure, under crisis. If students need us to do it, we can do it. But so that we did, as everyone else had to think about. At the Mount, I would say what really drove our response was, again, looking to our mission and to the founders and how they responded to crisis over their history. And the way they've responded always is they talk about caring, they have their own language, but caring for the dear neighbor, the person next to you, taking care of the people around you. And it really is, I would say, at Mount St. Mary's, a culture of care that defines who we are. And so we really dealt with the stress by focusing on the essential.
Mm.
As a leadership team, what does this community need of us? So our faculty and staff, our students, what do they need? And that really helped direct us and keep our focus on something that we could have an impact that would be positive and really facilitate the work of our community and the operations of the university in ways that we were hoping could reduce the stress that everyone was feeling. Now, I'm going to give you an example of what that looked like in real time. I remember going to one of our sisters at one point, and I said, our students are just overwhelmed. Like this is very difficult. And for your listeners that and viewers, our students are predominantly first generation low income students. This past year, 68% of our students were Pell eligible and 65% were first generation college students. So our students come with very few resources to support them. And so when they were not able to be on campus and they were confined to home, our students, many of them didn't have the resources they needed. So we got laptops out to people. We did everything we could, but it was very difficult for our students. And so one student, I was teaching a seminar and I was talking to each of my students on Zoom to see how they were faring. And so one student was quite overwhelmed. And he said to me, he was a pre-nursing student. We have a few men in our nursing program. And he said to me, I'm having a hard time. If I only had a pen. And I said, a pen? And he said, yeah. He said, if I only had a pen, he said, and then one of those whiteboards, he said, I could practice for my anatomy class. It would be helpful to me. And, and I'm sitting in my office at home now where I have ordered things off Amazon. I have what I need to do my work. Everything it's not ideal, but it works. And here's a student thinking, if I had a pen and a whiteboard, a marker and a whiteboard, it would help my learning. I don't have those. And I said, can we order those? He said, well, explained to me how it was difficult for his family. I was talking to this sister. I said, what do you do? And she said, you meet the needs of the person in front of you. Like you take care of the person. So I immediately thought, let's order, I'll send him pens and whiteboards or anything else he needs. And I talked to one of my colleagues who was much wiser than I, who said, no, we could do that, but there are so many students like him. So instead, let's set up something at the bookstore where they will get free supplies. The students who need it up to a certain dollar amount, not everybody's going to need it, but those who do will send them freight-free supplies they need so they can be successful in their home. So my colleague went ahead and I said, please do that. So he set it all up, which was so helpful. So not just that student, but other students could, and we got the announcement out. And so that's how we did it. One really need by need and really focusing on the individuals as well as the community.
That's a brilliant solution and inspiring story. And what a wonderful way to illustrate how the mission is lived out on a day-to-day basis. So thank you for sharing that. Now, you are a women's college, and you've held true to that for a very long time, unlike so many other women's colleges that unfortunately have gone by the wayside. And you have advocated nationally for women's education. So from your perspective, why is this so important to you? Why are women's colleges still essential today?
People say to me, are they really relevant? And I think, have you looked around? Yes, they're very relevant. I think women's colleges were founded to provide access to those who had been left out of higher education. And indeed, that's why Mount St. Mary's was founded 100 years ago. And so, the history of women's colleges has always been to bring people who have been left in the margins into the center. And women's colleges across the country do that today, and they do it beautifully. We have, in many of our colleges, we have an overrepresentation of lower income students, overrepresentation of students from communities who have been left out of higher ed. And we do that because that kind of diversity, that kind of richness of the student population and providing every woman who is looking for an opportunity, this path forward, is the standard of women's colleges. I think also, this is my second women's college. And when I got to my first women's college, I had not experienced that myself. And I watched as students in their first year of college, their development was so profound to me. They went from, coming in unsure of their potential, trying to find their voice, not fully confident, and which is normal for someone coming into college. I had worked at a co-ed institution, which was a fabulous place, and it took 4 years sometimes for women to get to that point where they understood who they were. And it was always moving to see that trajectory. I found at the end of 1 year to women's college, that's where women were. There is such a focus on the personal development of every student. There's a focus on the empowerment of these students as women and helping them figure out their potential. And also, at a women's college, you can't hide. When you're in a class, it's all women. So women are going to speak first. Women are going to speak throughout the class. And we tend to be pretty personalized learning environments. So we are really, part of our goal is to help you raise your hand and find your voice and express your opinions. Even if you do it with a bit of a tremor the first semester, you are going to gain that confidence. And it's such a hallmark of women's colleges. I'd say also, all women's colleges talk a lot about leadership, and we really do train the leaders of tomorrow. And one reason I think we're successful beyond the intentionality, almost all the leaders around you are women. And so you see women leading, and that kind of representation really matters. You have a sense of, I could do that. And then all the leadership positions are filled by women. So you're SGA president, you're president of any club, you are running campus ministry. It is women who are doing the work. And that, I think, is very inspiring, and it helps the younger women in the community really grow.
Yeah, no, indeed. I've seen all that you're talking about in up close and personal. And I also agree that we need this today more than ever. So now, under your leadership, you've created the Center for Advancement of Women. Tell us what that is, and what are you trying to do through the center?
Yeah, we created that some years ago. We had 15 years ago, we decided to, as a women's university, I believe strongly that all universities need to serve the greater community in which they are located. And so, we look around, we're in an incredible and in a rich city of Los Angeles. There are so many resources, but we thought, okay, it's a women's university. What's our unique contribution? And we thought, we're going to focus on gender equity. And we decided to start a project which has grown over 15 years, where we would track gender equity in our state across different sectors and different industries. And so whether it be government representation, educational attainment, salaries, across different sectors, we would look and say, women on public boards, like, how are women and girls in our state faring? And so we started doing that. A few years into that, we thought, we really need to have a center to house this work in, and also to make it more concrete, because, it went from a simple project to now this is a staple of what Mount St. Mary's will provide to the greater community, our city of Los Angeles, and our state, California as a whole. So we decided to, to kind of put a stake in the ground and create this center where we would serve as a resource for the greater community. And also internally, we would, involve students in our own research and our discussions around gender equity and leadership training in a world where women's voices are truly needed and are not at many of the tables where they need to be.
So what are you most proud of when you look back over the life of the center? Is there one thing that really stands out that you've carried forward?
I'm most proud of this report. And I'm proud of it because, we started the first year, we were kind of punching above our weight class, I would say. But, I think that's how all good things start. You just got to decide to be brazen and do it, and, and gain the expertise as you're going. And so I'm a big one in believing you can't wait till everything's in place to try something. You have to just go forward for things that matter and that need doing. And so that first year we did it, and we invited, some legislators. We invited a whole bunch of people. We had a good turnout. But we didn't get a lot of legislators. So we sent the report out after we had it published. And the next year, we started to get more people who were looking and saying, wow, this is a resource. And I'm so proud of the fact that we actually are a resource to the community. It was a bit of a dream when we started, and it really is serving our community. And, we believe strongly you have got to measure it to demonstrate the need. And to speak in generalities about representation of women or equity, or bringing women to the table is not convincing, not compelling, unless you back it up with some data to show here's where we're making great progress, and here's where we're not. It's also really thrilling for me to involve college students, and we also invite some high school students to a big event we have every year. It's thrilling for me to see them start to understand the work that is in front of them and what they'll face and what they're going to be called to act on. That's very inspiring to me.
These are difficult days for higher education. Even before the pandemic, higher education was in a free fall. Colleges are closing and merging at an ever-increasing rate. Leaders are facing challenges from every direction. No wonder so many experts are calling for a new kind of leadership. The Bay Path University Doctorate in Educational Leadership, with a concentration in Higher Ed Leadership and Organizational Studies, affectionately known as HELOS, was created for just this time and purpose. We asked seasoned leaders for their input, and then we designed a program in response. The EDD program prepares students to become self-aware, effective, adaptive leaders who know exactly how to leverage their institution's strengths and potential to create lasting change and enduring success. All coursework is online, and students receive an abundance of personalized support from peers and from our expert faculty. And through the dissertation and practice, our students learn how to plan and implement a change process to address a real organizational problem. If you want to become a catalyst for change in higher education and have an impact, take the next step by visiting our website at baypath.edu/EDD.
At the beginning, you talked a little bit about teaching and that it's important for you to stay in the classroom. And in fact, you continue teaching the first year seminar, which I think is pretty cool, even while serving as president. So tell us more about why you do this. Why is this important to you to of all the things you could do to carve out time to be in the classroom?
Well, first of all, I have to tell you selfishly, it's a lot of fun. There's nothing better than being with students. It's why we're all in this business. It's about students. So that just gives me incredible joy. But I also thought it was important. I don't know that I can fully know our students unless I'm interacting with them at the essence of what they're working on. I see students all the time in clubs and in presentations and in events on campus. And a lot of times our strongest student leaders are up and speaking, and I'm so proud of them and I love being with them. But being with students in the classroom is different. First of all, you're seeing them, I think, often at their most vulnerable. And they're incredible. And you see them so focused on getting this degree. Well, the reason they came to Mount St. Mary's, for an education, to have this baccalaureate degree that is going to change their trajectory and the pathway of their families. They are incredibly focused. And so I really thought for me to know our students well, I needed to be in the classroom with them and spend time with them and be on a different journey with them rather than just seeing them at all the different events we have on campus. And it really has changed my understanding of students. And I would say it's changed their understanding of me, which has been really rewarding.
I would think so. Yeah. I'm sure they see you in a different light.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in how it's changed your own thinking.
When I came to Mount St. Mary's, I knew my own experience was very different from the experience of my students. I, come from a real privilege, and from my family, both of my parents went to college. It was a given that my four sisters and I would all go to college and probably get advanced degrees, as my parents did. And so that was just assumed. And I knew it always, and it never even occurred to me to think differently. Same thing with my own daughters. When I came to the Mount, our student body is so different from the experience that I've had. First generation college students, many of them lower income, most of them lower income. For many of our students, going to college it's not only was not a given, it was not even an aspiration. I have many students who tell me that, it wasn't until a teacher or a student from college, we have students who go into our high schools, one of our Mount students said to them, "You should go to college." In fact, many of our students received an opposite message. Many of them will tell us how they had someone say, "You're not college material." And so when our students come and they come and they're in the classroom, you see that incredible commitment to what this means. This is an opportunity, and it's not just an opportunity for our students, it's an opportunity for their families as well. And so I think I knew all of that theoretically. I could see it, but when you're in the classroom with students and you see how much this matters, and you also see often how many challenges they are overcoming to be in the class that day. It's truly inspiring because they take it seriously. And so, you know what? boy, I take it even more seriously. They have this incredible, our students, we have a term for them. We call them unstoppable. It's sort of a motto, but it actually is absolutely true to who they are. If we provide them the resources, they are truly unstoppable. They are incredibly resilient. They rise above challenges that I can't imagine how they do it, but they do. And I think I got to understand that much more intimately being in the classroom with them. I mean, the one student I spoke about during COVID, the need he had for basic
Right.
utensils, the things that you need, instruments to just that I take for granted. I wouldn't know that sitting in my office, quite honestly, if I hadn't been in a classroom on a Zoom call with him individually, because that's something he wouldn't say in front of everybody. So I do think there's a special relationship that happens between students and their faculty, one that I treasured when I was a faculty member. And in those moments where I'm not just the president, but I'm their teacher, I learned so much more, and they share more than I could ever know, and that helps me be better in my job. But it's yeah, it's I am incredibly inspired by our students. They move me every day.
And how has your thinking about women's leadership been impacted by what you've learned from your students,
Yeah.
whether teaching or leading?
Mhm. You know, one of the things that I've learned, which sounds so simple and perhaps I should always have known, but leadership really looks different on different people, and so each of us brings our cultural background. We bring our own experiences. We bring our own values. All of that together into what we do as leaders and how we lead. And so I see our students doing it in many ways differently than I, and also generationally, quite honestly. I see them doing it often different than I, but there's this authenticity that they bring to their leadership, and this humility, quite honestly, that has made me much more appreciative of leadership looks different. Purpose-filled leadership looks different on different people, and there is not one size fits all. And I mean, that's so obvious, but I see it in ways that have really moved me. And thinking, so we have to empower our students to own their own gifts. And I think that not the gifts that they might want to have, not the gifts that that leader over there might have, but the gifts they have. And then they become these powerful leaders, sometimes quieter leaders. I'm more of an out there, as I said, really energetic. But there's this authenticity that they bring to it that's very moving. And so I've come to really appreciate that. And I think all of us, as I think about the leaders in my life, or the women and men that I really respect as leaders, it is often someone with a very different style than I have, but it's someone who's so compelling. And so my students have helped me understand that looks so different on so many different people.
Yeah, boy, that's valuable and rich
Mhm.
insight. So
Mhm.
now I want to switch gears because one of the things I've heard about you is that the pilgrimage experience that you have led and participated in has been a particularly meaningful part of your presidency there.
Yes, it
It
is.
has been life-changing. So can you tell us
Mhm.
about that experience? What is it? What is the pilgrimage? Take us maybe inside one of those experiences and what it taught you about your own journey in life.
I've enjoyed the fact that coming here, and it's Catholic Women's University, so I bring my full identity as a woman, as a Catholic, as a someone who spiritual life is very important, and I get to live that as part of my job. It's quite a gift. So we started doing these pilgrimages. I went on a pilgrimage quite a few years ago now, and because I wanted to understand the history of our founders, the Sisters of Saint Joseph of Carondelet. They're incredibly inspiring women. They are so wise and they are so fearless and so strategic in the work they've done across their history. So I wanted to understand them better. And because I didn't know much about them when I came to the Mount, and I was meeting lots of sisters, but I wanted to know the history. So I decided I'd go on this pilgrimage. And so I did. I went to their origin city, which is in Le Puy, France, and went on this journey to study their history. And they, 375 years ago, came together started in this little city. Um, what was life-changing for me is their story and to be in the medieval city where the story came to life. But put succinctly, six women in 1650 came together with this sense of wanting to form a community to serve their community, to serve the Le Puy community, which was a city that was suffering after 100 years war, plague, people were destitute. And so they, instead of going into a convent, which was what women of the day would do if you wanted to be a woman religious, they had this new vision and they did it differently. And they came together, which was outrageous in 1650. Women weren't allowed to come together and form their own community and live apart. And they did it. And then they had this idea that they were going to serve the community, but they said instead of just assuming what people needed, they would go out and ask the people, what do you need? And then they would respond to the needs of the time. Hence where their history and that DNA that we have comes. So they did this, and what they found was the most vulnerable people in their community were women and girls who had lost their husbands and their fathers in the war, in this plague, and they were at most risk, and so many of them had been exploited through prostitution. So they had this idea. One of the six women knew how to make lace. Le Puy is one of the lace capitals of the world. Knew how to make lace, so they taught women how to make lace to bring them out of lives of prostitution, where they really had been forced as a way to feed themselves and their families, and to a life of dignity, a life of safety, a life of purpose. And that story and being in the very kitchen where they would gather 375 years ago and had this dream, this idea of educating women for lives of security and lives of purpose, in a radical way to do it, in a way that no one else had ever done successfully, that changed my life. You realize that this is to do it back then took courage and vision that, I don't think most of us even have. They did something entirely different, and it changed 375 years of history because of that. It still continued, and it really changed the way I approached my work.
Yeah, boy. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. It's obviously deeply personal and impactful. So now you lead, is it true you lead pilgrimages? And you do it every year?
Every year, except during COVID, we took 2 years off. I've been doing it for.
And so tell us about that. If I were to sign up, can anybody sign up and go on one of these?
Yeah. So we have, when I got back from there, I thought other people have to experience this. This is something we have to make part of the Mount. So we opened up a pilgrimage for faculty and staff, and our board of trustees, Sisters of St. Joseph, come as well, and our alums and friends of the college who want to come. And anybody can sign up. We do have grants that we provide every year for faculty and staff who apply for those, because I think it's really important that I think it's important that as many people as can experience this, so that they have a sense of what they're part of, because this is bigger than the mission is so interesting here. And once you experience that, you realize you're a part of something really quite profound, and it does change. It impacts the way you do your work. And so we've been doing this. And so if you came, I would say to you, as we started on the journey together, that people come for different reasons. Some have a free trip to France and they're thinking, well, this is great, I want to learn about the sisters. Others want to learn the history. Some are looking for a spiritual experience. But people from all faith backgrounds, or without any faith background, come together in this pilgrimage to explore the history and the legacy of the Sisters of St. Joseph. And in doing so, come to an understanding of why we do the work we do at Mount St. Mary's, and how we are called to a specific mission that really is around love and bringing people together through love and meeting the needs of all who are in our community and beyond, and our responsibility to the greater world. And we do it in a very specific way through the sisters. So it's an incredible experience. We have a lot of fun. We learn a lot about the history. We go to some very beautiful spaces, sacred spaces. And it leaves an imprint and a real impact on everyone who does it.
So do you have a story? And you don't tell us who it is, but do you have a story of how somebody has been personally impacted, how this has transformed their life?
Yeah, I would say probably every single person who goes on this pilgrimage has that experience, because it truly is. It is life-changing. But I see it every time when individuals come, and often I have one colleague who came And I knew she was coming to understand the history, very, she was looking to understand better so she could figure out how her work fit within this framework. But those would be the words you use, framework. And so she started off, and she was very much, I could see in her head, and learning it and intellectually taking this all in, which is wonderful to see. But every person, and I note this, at some point, it becomes hard. And you see it move from the head to the heart as well. And it touches them. And so this one colleague, I remember the very moment we were sitting on top of a volcanic peak that where there's a chapel built. This was built in the Middle Ages, which, it's phenomenal when you're up there. You have to climb over 1,000 steps to get up to it. And you literally are up on this like little mountain of dried volcano. And you think about, how did someone build this? Like, how did anybody envision building this beautiful old little chapel on this, they call it like a needle. And I remember seeing my colleague in there, and she was looking around, and all of a sudden I could see that this place, for whatever reason it was, this place that had been built so long ago, got to her heart. And then, from there on, there's a change in the way you interact with the history, because it moves from just intellectual to meaningful and profoundly personal. And so what happens during that trip is you start to see yourself as part of this incredible history and this legacy that calls you to respond fully in a way that is not just intellectual, but it's with your entire being. And so there you just see a shift. And I think it's the shift. One faculty member told me this year at the end of it that she knew the story well. She had studied the story. She knew the history. She was a creative writer. She wrote about the history, but she had no idea till she was there what it felt like. And that changed the way she would teach and interact with students following this, because it just, something in her shifted in terms of the sense of connection to something much bigger and more important than anything she might teach in her classroom, but about helping students form as leaders and part of this incredible tradition. Yeah.
So now I want to return to the topic of innovation. So,
Okay.
because you started out talking about innovation and how it's a part of the history of your institution, you have been quoted as saying, "If you think excellence is hard, try innovation." So, what do you mean by that?
That was in my early years. We were doing our first visioning around a strategic plan that we knew we had to build. And I heard a lot from folks about, we got to be innovative. We're so innovative. We all want to be innovative. And I heard it, and I thought, this is great. But it's interesting when you start talking about, what does that mean? Like, what might change? It turns out I learned that not everybody likes change. Not everybody's comfortable with change. And so it's hard. It's hard. Everyone agrees on excellence. And that's even hard to establish. Like, how do we make sure that we are doing our best in everything? That takes some real exploration and some, self-interrogation in terms of, am I doing my best for my students? Am I doing my best, for the faculty and staff? And so excellence is it's an aspirational thing. You're always working to be stronger. We ask our students to do their best and to always work toward excellence. We're not all excellent every day, so it's hard. But innovation means I am willing to change the way I do things, the way I think about things, and the future I had already thought I was going to be living. That's difficult. People are much more comfortable, all of us, we as human beings are much more comfortable about someone else changing. And I think we're very good at saying how someone else might need to change. But to change the way we think and the way we do things, it's difficult. It's very disconcerting to do that. But that's what we're called to do. We have to do that. And higher ed is called to do that. And we're doing it, but not always at a pace that I think would match the needs of students and the greater society.
Well, and as a leader, if you choose to embrace innovation,
Yeah.
you're choosing a more challenging path for that
Yeah.
reason. And
Yeah.
And so you can understand why some leaders choose not to go down the path of innovation. But thank you for sharing your perspective on that. Now we just have a few minutes left. There are two
Okay.
questions I want to touch on before we end. And the first has to do with unexpected lessons. So after so many years as president, what surprised you, or what has surprised you most about yourself as a leader?
Probably what surprised me most that I'm still here, to be honest. And I mean that when I came into this position, it never occurred to me I'd be staying more than a decade. It never occurred to me, and I knew it would be hard. And so I just thought, you come, you're president for a while. So I think what really surprises me, is that I'm here and that I would be nowhere else. Once I got to know this place and establish the relationships I have here with the faculty and the staff, our board, and most of all our students, I I always say to people, where else would I go? This is an incredible place. Every day I'm moved, but that does surprise me actually, and I'm very grateful that this community we keep growing together, and that people allow me that opportunity because it's not. Sometimes people just feel, oh, we need a change, but our community here at the Mount just hangs with me too, and we figure it out together. We do a lot of self corrections, and they help correct me. But I think that sense of sticking to this long is probably a bit surprising to me. But at the same time, where else would I be? I can't imagine that place.
What a great thing to be able to say after
Mhm.
this many years in. So, as you think about the actual job of doing a presidency, is there anything you wish you had known at the outset?
Oh gosh, there's so much I wish I'd known just in terms of the skills and the understanding of budgets and all those things that, as a French PhD, I didn't have in my wheelhouse. But that's okay. I learned them because, I know how to learn. I think if I look back at myself 15 years ago, the advice I'd give myself, I think I'd say relax a little bit,
Mm,
enjoy it. Um, be yourself. And I think I would have, I would have enjoyed that even more if I had just been able to just relax into the position, having the confidence that I could do it. I was nervous. It was a big responsibility, and I was hoping I could manage it and and to do well by this place that was looking for a strong leader. So I wish I'd just known that, you're going to be okay. Trust the
yeah.
people you work with. Trust them.
What about
Yeah.
emerging women who are just starting out and
Yeah.
they are looking at you and they think, oh gosh, I might like to be a president
Yeah.
like Dr. McElaney-Johnson someday. What advice would you give to them?
I would tell them, and depending on where they are in their life, one of the things I've told women, particularly who are out of college now and are thinking about what path, and I would say this to college students too, you don't have to have it all figured out. I think we try to plan our lives. And I've had women say, when I want to do this, and then I want to do this, and then I'll do this. And I would say life is not like that at all. So, don't try to plan it out. But here's the thing that I think the best advice I can give is to say yes to opportunities. I mean, the thing I am so glad I did across my career was I tried new things when people suggested I might. And that was critically important because there was no way when I was a young faculty member I ever thought I would be a president of a university. That wasn't in my thinking, wasn't in an aspiration, but all the different experiences led me to that moment when that was the right next move, and I'm so grateful for it. But I do tell young people, you have to be willing to be uncomfortable and to change and to say yes. It isn't always the easiest thing, but you need to do that so that you can have that next experience, which will lead you through this incredible life. But it's not what we plan typically. And that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, boy, great advice. So here's our signature question. This is the very
Okay.
last question we ask
Okay.
of every guest who
Okay.
comes on the show. So, and as you know, this season we're talking only with women presidents. So, as a woman leading in higher education today, what do you believe is your most important contribution to the future of the sector, and how do you hope your leadership will inspire the next generation of women leaders.
And it's such an exciting time and a fraught time in higher ed right now. But I think it is probably insisting and also being motivated by change and by a willingness to be flexible and responsive. I mean, it really is about responding to the needs of the time. And I think that probably is the signature of my leadership, that I'm always trying to think about what that looks like. And I would, add that I think as leaders, we are very insistent, particularly in these days, with good reason, on data. And we talk with great pride about being data driven in all of our decisions. And I would say that is true. But perhaps the thing I value most is you also have to be willing to try something creative. I think creativity can get lost sometimes with too much data. And there are sparks of ideas. And I think as leaders, and I would say this to those coming up through the ranks, when you see that spark, have the courage to ignite it. Sometimes you have to take that jump because everything says to you, this is where we should go. And I think that creative moment is so important to the future of higher education and to the future of our country. And so that would be, I hope people would say, I was willing to take a chance and to really ignite a spark that we needed to kindle, if you will. And I would advise people, don't forget your creativity, that creative genius that I think each of us has. If we unleash it, is probably as important or more important than all the data. So trust that.
Well, and I think your legacy already illustrates that in spades. So what a great way to end the conversation. So Ann, thank you so very much for being with me and for being willing to share the impressive and inspiring journey that you've been on and that your institution has been on all these years.
I appreciate it. Thank you. It's been so much fun. I really enjoyed speaking with you. So thanks for inviting me on.